Welcome to Accounting in the Wild, where we'll discuss various subjects in the tax and accounting world, also featuring tales from the field and interviews on various tax and accounting subjects. All this and much, much more on Accounting in the Wild. And now, here's your host, Jason Dynison.
And welcome to another episode of Accounting in the Wild, brought to you by MyCPE1. To earn CPE credits for watching or listening to this podcast, head on over to my-cpe.com and continue your professional learning journey. And in addition to getting CPE credits for this podcast, you can find literally 15,000 hours of content at MyCPE for whatever your continuing education needs are. my-cpe.com. Our guest this week is Mike Grinberg with Proofpoint Marketing, and we're going to talk about various business development things, business development strategies. And I think this is of interest to both tax professionals and just business owners in general. How do you set effective goals? How do you make the transition to advisory services? I've always said it's very hard to make that transition from charging a few $100 to prepare tax returns to charging more and offering advisory services. So Mike and I will discuss those things right now on Accounting in the Wild. We have Mike Grinberg with us on Accounting in the Wild today. First of all, Mike, welcome. Mike is with Proofpoint Marketing LLC, and we're going to be talking about several things today relating to business growth and development. So, Mike, welcome. And let's start with kind of the stereotypical first question. Tell us about yourself. Give us a little elevator pitch about Mike Grinberg and Proofpoint Marketing.
Awesome. I'll keep it short because I know nobody likes a long intro. So this is my first time on an accounting podcast, so there's that. But I appreciate accountants very much because I personally hate accounting. Doing it myself, that is. I know it's important. My main objective as a growth consultant, and I generally work with professional services firms, so consulting firms, accounting firms, etc., is to make them the lowest risk choice for their ideal clients. And there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but that is my elevator pitch, if you will.
So Mike is here today to talk to us about a few different things relating to business development. You know, we call this Accounting in the Wild, and theoretically the audience is accountants, but there's also a lot of listeners who are just business owners and kind of interested parties. And really, before we get into the three big things we wanted to talk about, Mike, it seems to me like a lot of the things we're going to be talking about are not specific to any one industry. So an accountant, an attorney, an investment advisor, a business coach, insert anybody in that professional services field, they could use the things we're going to talk about today. Is that a correct assumption?
100%.
So the three things that we have on our list, in no particular order here, these are just the order that I wrote them down one time when Mike and I were talking previously, is defining goals and desired lifestyle, shifting from transactional roles to higher value advisory, and frameworks and methodologies as unique IP for premium pricing. So let's start with that first one on the list of defining goals and desired lifestyle. I mean, just on the surface, I guess that sounds kind of self-evident or whatever. I guess it is, but yet doing it seems to be something that would be a big sticking point for a lot of people. I guess we should back up. What do we mean, I guess, when we say defining goals and desired lifestyle?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of borrowed the concept from a guy named Casey Graham. He ran a SaaS-enabled services company a while back, and he wrote a book called, forget the exact title. It's like the No BS Small Business Book, I think, or something of that nature. And he had this concept, I think he coined it, I'm not sure, called owner's intent. And I appreciated it when I saw it. And I've kind of borrowed that concept and expanded on it a bit. So what I mean by goals and desired lifestyle is this owner's intent, meaning why are you, Mr. Accountant, let's use an example of Jason. What do you want out of your business? Why are you running this business? Why did you start it? But like, what do you want to get out of it? And it seems like a simple question, but if you look at what many professional services founders struggle with, it's exactly that. It's the not being clear on that answer, right? So usually you ask somebody, I want to make a good living. Okay. What does that mean to you? Or it might be, I want to spend more time with my family. Okay. In what ways? Or I want to do good for the world. All right. How? Right. Or, you kind of get the point, right? The answers are generally pretty broad. And even when they sound more specific, what's the more, I'm trying to think of a recent one I've had with a founder. It could be like, I want to make, X amount of revenue with this type of profitability. And I want to be able to go on, one luxurious vacation with my wife once a year or something like that. All right, sounds specific, but it's not specific enough, realistically. And the reason why this is important is if you talk to a lot of these people, even the ones that have a seemingly successful business from a accounting and finance and P&L perspective, they're not terribly happy people.
They are not.
I can tell you they are not. It's not most, but it's many.
Many.
And my opinion is that the reason why is exactly this. It's they have never really taken the time to define what their owner's intent is, meaning what do they clearly want, quantifiably and qualifiably. Is that a word? I don't think qualifiably is a word.
Quantify and qualitative.
Qualitatively and quantitatively. Let's go. Let's use the real terms. What do they want out of their business today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now? Let's just say. And the other question related to this that I like to ask is what's your end game? Because that has to be part of this conversation. Because the other part where people tend to be surprisingly unhappy is once they sell. Or once they get out, right? And there's different reasons for that I've seen, but those two things go in tandem where I think you proactively need to, again, define what do I want out of this business and how do I want to exit out of this business? Because the reality is everybody exits, just depends on what kind of exit it is. Like dying and the business folding is also an exit. So...
So, does this get back to me, it seems like it gets back to, you could disagree with me. I know we're going to disagree a little bit, not like fight disagree, but just like the
intellectual
advisory.
Disagreement is a good thing.
That's right. This seems to me like it's like when people say, I'm an entrepreneur. And it's like, no, you're really not. And I'm guilty of this myself. You're not an entrepreneur. You own a job. And that's not a criticism or a put down or anything. It's just a statement, I guess. And I feel like defining goals kind of gets into that discussion too, because I find a lot of what I do is just like I get up and I go to work because that's what you do. And I just happen to own the business. And intellectually or whatever, I know that I need to change that viewpoint. I need to work on defining my goals better. And I have been, but I don't know. To me, it feels like that kind of gets into that same discussion about, do you own a business? Are you an entrepreneur? Do you own a job?
That's an interesting way to frame it. I don't know that I thought about it that way, but I guess something that came to mind as you were saying it is, it's kind of, take it back to, second and third grade math class, which is like, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square, right? So like, is an entrepreneur a business owner? Yeah. Is a business owner necessarily an entrepreneur? No. And that's okay. And I think it also gets into like, I hate once you say the word lifestyle, I think it kind of throws people for a bit of a loop, because then it's like, well, do I have a lifestyle business or do I not have a lifestyle business? And I personally hate the term, because the way I think about it is every business is a lifestyle business. The question is, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live? Like, I believe that the SaaS startup founder that wants to build a unicorn and get venture funded and, work balls to the wall for 10 years or whatever it is, they probably know what they're getting into. At least they should. And they're choosing that lifestyle. I know people in investment banking who are partners in big firms, and it's like, I don't understand it. I mean, I've talked to like there's a guy I know that he's on the road. He's, wife, 2 kids, etc. He's on the road. I don't know, probably I think 200 plus days out of the year. Doing M&A deals and whatever. I'm like, do you enjoy it? Like, why do you do that? He's like, I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm like, seriously? It's like, yeah, I enjoy the work. It works for me. All right. Who am I to judge, right? So it's like, again, I think that when it comes to this owner's intent question, it's the same kind of thing. Like, there's no wrong answer. And that's, I think, the other, I'm sure we're going to want to talk about like pitfalls, if you will. That's one where I think a lot of people fall into. It's like, what are other people going to think if I say this? Who cares? The only person that matters in this situation is you and maybe your significant other in your family. That's it. Like, I think people get afraid, well, what are my employees going to think? I mean, sure, like there's some limits, right? Like, hey, my goal is to have 5 Ferraris in the driveway, and to do that, I'm going to pay you minimum wage and work you to death. Yeah, okay, I probably don't want to share that with people, and it's probably not a successful business anyway. Like, you're probably not going to get there, but I think within limits, like if you communicate it the right way, and there's a question of, do you tell that to all of your employees? Do you tell it to your key employees? Do you just keep it completely to yourself, but manage the business in that way? I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there necessarily. But the point is you still got to define it for yourself and forget what other people think, because you're living your life. You're not living somebody else's.
Right. And I think I probably kind of got us off track here with that question that I asked, but kind of along those same lines. So everybody can define goals, and it's a good thing, even if you say, you know what, I want to just get up and go to work and own a job. And I have said that there is something very alluring for me about, like, I'm the boss or whatever. And, if I need to go run an errand, I don't have to get permission. I don't have to take PTO or track it anywhere. I do have work, obviously, that has to get done, but I can decide how and when it gets done. And that's very powerful for a lot of business owners. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's still good to define goals and what you really want out of all this, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's something to think about, too, is like, I think it'll touch on the question you asked, which I don't think took us off track at all. It's another lens, if you will, with this kind of the question around entrepreneur versus business owner, right? Let's talk franchise ownership. Are you an entrepreneur? No, you're a business owner. Even if you own 10 of them, 20 of them, you're still, in my opinion at least, it's not like the person that created the franchise organization was an entrepreneur. You were a business owner, and that's totally fine. You'd be incredibly successful. But the interesting thing there is, I was just talking to a good friend of mine here the other day, and one of the things he was telling me is at one point he was developing a coaching business that was meant to target franchise owners. He didn't go that route, but the reason why was most franchise owners have never owned a business before, and there's virtually no coaching as part of franchise purchasing, very little, especially when it comes to like this type of stuff, like owner's intent and how to, you might get some from a, operational perspective, obviously, because they want the business to get off the ground. But so I think there's definitely something there.
So in your mind, what makes a successful goal? You touched on this about the vagueness of so many goals. And this is true, not just if you're a business owner, it's just true in life in general. When you set goals, they need to be, and I'm answering part of the question, I guess, for you, but they need to be like specific and determinable and actionable, right? Well, how do you define a successful goal?
Yeah, I mean, there's the kind of, call it traditional definition, like the SMART goals, right? I think that's a great framework. But I think the main thing is for this is when most people think of goals as it relates to business, they're financial targets or things like that. And what I really want to get people to think about is yes and. Yeah, you need, like, financial targets are fine, but do you really think about goals for you? Again, it's why, what do you want out of this business? I can pretty much guarantee you if you set yourself, if it's just a financial target, you will not be happy. Very unlikely. By accident, sure, it's possible. But so the goal really, again, needs to be specific and actionable, like you said. And to do that, like, again, it's like, well, I want to spend time with my family. What does that look like to you? Because it's going to look different to everybody. Some people, it's like, well, I want to be there when my daughter wakes up. I want to be there to put her to bed, and I want to be there to pick her up from school, and I want to go on weekly dates with my wife, and I want to, it can go on and on and on. And for some people, it's like, I want to be there for all the soccer games. That's what it means to me. That's it. You sure? Yeah. All right, cool. It's not like there's no wrong answer, but it's like everybody's different, but you have to be specific. Well, what is that? Because most people say, well, I want to spend time with family and I want to make a good living. All right. What's a good living to you? Does that mean you're flying private to vacations all the time? Because that's one thing. Or does that mean you're taking road trips and camping trips? Like what does all that mean, and how often? And also, like, why? Like, that's the other thing is like, why do you want that? Because a lot of people, it's kind of, they say things that they think they want or that they should want, but it's not. There's really not a good reason, or they want it because there's some. And again, this might be maybe getting too deep, but like there's some trauma. Like, oh, well, my parents never took us anywhere and I feel like I need to go on vacations all the time. It's like, well, maybe for a couple of years, but after that, are you really going to want that anymore? Once you kind of prove to yourself that you can? Maybe, maybe not. So you have to kind of unpack all those things, and that goes well beyond my skill set. Like, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but
there is defining your why. I had another guest talking about a somewhat similar topic recently where he talked about one of the things he has conversations with business owners about is define your why, which is, it's great to say I want to make money. Okay, well, why? And I think that can be, I think that's, you're not a psychologist or whatever, and neither am I, but if you could define your why, I feel like that helps just with your outlook on life, I think.
100%. I think the 5 whys framework, by the way, is a great one where, it's the, like, use the example, I want to have money. Why? I want to go on vacations. Why? Because my family will enjoy them. Why? Because whatever, right? And you go down the list, and then you might end up with, well, because mom and dad hated me. Oh, shit. All right, that's a problem. Let's figure that out first. That's obviously an extreme example, but And also not a personal one. I have no idea. Like I don't mean to make fun of or diminish those things. I had a pretty good childhood, so I can't complain. But
well, now I had something in my head, and now it's my turn to be like, I can't remember what I was going to ask Mike about.
It'll pop back in right as we move on to the next topic. Like, oh, I remember now.
Right. Well, I guess that's a sign. Move on to the next topic. And that next topic is shifting from transactional roles to higher value advisory. So that's one of the things that we hear a lot in the accounting field over the last probably 10 years or so, and growing more and more and more. You've got to do advisory work. Clients want advisory. And I agree. And I know you and we had a little dialogue on LinkedIn about this. I have always said, I agree with advisory. I think that is, well, whether you're an accountant or any other field, advisory is definitely what to do. The problem is, how do you do it and delivering adequate service? If you're a smaller operator, and just to use accountants as an example, you're charging a few $100 to slap together someone's Form 1040 at tax time. How do you go from that to, with a straight face, charging someone $1,000 for that or $1,500 for that and offering advisory? It sounds great, but you better deliver the goods if you're gonna charge that much. And it's not that I disagree. It's just that it's like, how do you get there? So I'm doing a lot of rambling here, Mike. You're the guest. I'm just the host. I'm supposed to ask questions of you.
It's a conversation. I think it's good for me to know where you're coming from.
Well, and based on what I just said, how would you respond to that when we talk about shifting from transactional $200 tax returns, or $50 advising sessions or whatever that a consultant might do because their rates are too low, whatever the professional service is? What do you say on this topic?
I think there are a couple of things to consider. One is the ICP, so the ideal customer profile. So if you are, I would assume, so I'm not an expert in the accounting space, but I would assume that for somebody that's running they're an individual CPA, maybe they have like a $500,000 business, let's just say, and they've got hundreds of clients, a few maybe small business owners, and they're just filing, probably thousands of clients actually if you're a $500,000 business, and you're doing that. Only a small percentage of those people that are already your clients are going to need advisory. The average your average W-2, low to middle income W-2 earning individual doesn't give a shit about the advisory side of things. They just don't.
That's very true.
Just file my taxes, make sure I don't get a penalty. I'm good, right? So the first question is, if you want to shift to that, this kind of goes back to why. Goes back to kind of our original topic, right? Like, it's not a must. You don't have to do it. I don't think, at least. I think there's. I don't know. Like with AI and stuff like that, does the basic return go away? I don't know enough. I'll leave that to you. But let's assume it doesn't, because we're talking more than just accounting. Let's assume we're talking about something transactional that maybe AI can't easily replace in the next, 5 years. You don't have to make the move. So the first question is, well, why do you want to? Why do you want to charge more? How does this, is it a lifestyle thing? It's because for a lot of people, what I've heard from accountants is oh my God, when it comes to tax season, it's just, I don't sleep, I don't eat, all this kind of stuff for 2-3 months. And maybe your reason for shifting your model is, well, yeah, you're going to do some of this, but then you're going to spread your revenue making across the rest of the year so you can have it, more decent lifestyle. And then again, what does that mean? Et cetera, et cetera. Right. And this is kind of one thing we didn't talk about in that, around that question is, I think if you haven't done that work, like figuring out your why and whatever, it doesn't matter when. Like, it's kind of sort of like what was the best time to plant a tree? Well, 100 years ago. When's the next best time to plant a tree? Today or tomorrow, right? Like, so do it as soon as you can, and then you have to realize that you're probably going to have to make some uncomfortable decisions based on that. You might be in a business that no longer suits you. It happened to me, by the way. I mean, my wife and I shut down our marketing agency because we realized that we built something we didn't really want. So I'm speaking from personal experience. But then going back to that, let's say you've answered the why. Okay, I want this for a solid reason, and I'm willing to make the changes to make it happen. All right. First is audience, right? Who's your ideal target? And it very likely isn't the same people. Okay, so you're not going to make that transition like that because, well, now you have to figure out, well, what do these people want? What does good advisor even look like? Right. So maybe you have experience with it, maybe you don't. If you don't, now you got to think about, am I bringing on a partner? Am I going to merge with somebody? How do I make that even happen? Because again, if you don't have the skill set, I mean, over time you could probably make that shift, like, and learn it and whatnot, but that's a long process. So it's what skills and resources do I need to make that shift? And then it's, how do I present that new offering to the market, right? Because again, that person that we're talking about is used to doing transactional, like, whatever. Hey, come in at whatever, $70 or $100 and we'll file your returns, guaranteed. Okay. Like, that's one thing. But when you're saying, hey, we're going to do tax planning and whatever for small business owners or family offices or whatever that niche becomes, well, now that's a very specific thing. What does that entail? And that kind of gets us into the next thing we want to talk about, I think. But like, what are the frameworks? What are the things you need to create, both from a framework and methodology perspective, from a service design perspective, and then pricing actually in itself, like price and the act of pricing something is a marker of value just on its own, right? So like I was talking to, for example, to somebody recently that runs a business where they provide VAs, so virtual assistants from the Philippines, right? And he was asking, well, is it better if I tell you that I can't remember the exact numbers. It's like, is it better if I tell you it's $20 an hour for, with a minimum of X number of hours? Or is it better if I tell you that it's, $2,500 a month? It's the same thing. Like the total is going to be the same. I was like, honestly, the $2,500 is better. I think it's better because when I think VA from the Philippines, I think cheap. But if you tell me it's $2,500, I'm like, oh, that's quality. That's a mark of quality. Versus, again, like, could you charge hourly for advisory services? Sure, you could. And I'm not saying hourly is a bad thing, by the way. It might be the right thing, right? And your hourly rate might be $1,000 an hour. Okay, right? Like, so I think the act of pricing itself is really, really important. And again, I'm not going to call myself a pricing strategist. I know enough to be dangerous. I've priced enough things, I guess, but I'm not a pricing expert.
Well, in this discussion, sometimes it's good to have conversations with others because it helps to get me out of my head on some of these things. Sometimes in my head, I'm a little too cynical on things, especially when you're in it every single day doing this stuff. You could get in your silo. And one of the things that's come into my head, not just in this discussion, but as I've thought more about this, is think of being out on, I like to talk in metaphors and analogies and stuff. It's like you're out on the ocean or something, and, your basic compliance or transactional work, you're sticking your net in the water and fish just kind of come into the net, and you just pull the net up every now and then. And they may not be big fish, but if you do that enough times a day, you could probably make a meal for a little while. But a lot of times when we talk about advisory, we're talking about go over here to this part of the lake where in this water or in this part of the ocean, there's like I don't know how big a whale is, but, several 1,000-pound whale or whatever that you could catch that'll feed you for a year. Is that kind of what we would be talking about here, that you have to shift? Guess what I'm getting at is you have to shift your mindset of, you've been over here with these little fish, and that's okay. But if you want something higher value, you're not going to get it there. You have to move over here and try getting the bigger fish over here. This seems to get back to what we talked about as our first topic about defining goals and be specific. I mean, that's essentially what this is too, isn't it?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So transactional roles to higher value advisory, I think, feeds nicely into the third item on our list: frameworks and methodologies as unique intellectual property. This is something, I mean, whether you're an accountant or any other, anybody in the consultant world, our value is not really in preparing the tax return or whatever. It may be what we do and we get paid for it, but really it's up here in our heads. If you're just listening to the audio, you can't see me dramatically pointing and tapping on my head, but that's what we have to offer, isn't it, Mike? Is what's up here, and finding ways to harness that and make money off of it. Is that what we're getting at here when we say frameworks and methodologies as unique IP for premium pricing?
100%. And again, this, I think, for the people who are totally fine being tax preparers, and there's totally nothing wrong with that. Again, like I said, I mean, the guy I used to use when I was much younger and didn't have a business, like, he had a very successful home business and did just fine. That's okay. But for anybody, again, if premium pricing is your goal, then yes, like in the way to think about it is this: I don't care what whether you're in accounting, if you're a fractional CFO, if you're a management consultant or whatever, an engineering firm, any and all of that. The reality is the amount of competition in your space is dramatically increasing. It has been for years anyway, and it's increasing even more. So, and if you look at pretty much across the board, across the professional services industries, it's AI, it's offshore talent, and it's fractionals. Take those three things, and if I need an accountant that specializes in work with agencies, there's thousands of them. If I need a engineering firm that has expertise, a med device engineering firm that has expertise in microfluidics, maybe not thousands, but there are many. And the reality is the more choice there is, the more risk there is from a buyer perspective in making the wrong choice. So, and there's been tons of studies on this. There's a book called The Paradox of Choice, which has been a big influence on the way I think about positioning, which is kind of what we're talking about here. In case anybody's curious, Paradox of Choice was written by Brian Schwartz, I think in the mid 90s. He's a professor out of, I forget where. But he ran these studies where they did, I think it's been a while since I actually read the book. I think it was jams, where in the grocery stores it was like 3, 5, or 10 or whatever. And, the original kind of thinking was, well, the more choice there is, the more people will buy. And it was actually the opposite. So the more choice there is, the more risk there is, the less people buy. Right. And you see this actually quite a bit. If you look at enterprise deals, there's all sorts of data out there that say, I think between 40 and 60% of deals die due to no decision. They didn't choose a competitor. They just chose not to do anything or stay with the status quo. The reason I bring that up is if that is the case, if that is the environment that we are living in as business owners or entrepreneurs, whichever one you want, then our main objective is to de-risk the buying decision. How do you decrease the perceived risk that your buyer has? Now, again, if you're a tax preparer, this probably doesn't matter that much for a couple of reasons. One is there's a shortage of CPAs, there's a ton of demand, and it's a pretty transactional thing where, I don't know if I'm choosing a tax person. I don't know if there's a ton of risk.
It's funny because what you say about the paradox of choice, I do think applies, because I can tell you in my town in little old Iowa, population 12,000, there's 6 other places that people could go just in that town. And depending on how broad you expand the circle, you're talking, even in a rural area, literally hundreds of other options that you could choose from. I do think, though, that there is...
You don't have a choice. Like, you are going to choose somebody. You're not going to choose... I don't think there's very few people that are not going to go, yeah, you know what? I just don't know what to choose. I'm just not going to file my taxes this year.
Exactly. So that isn't going to happen with tax. It is true that you could hang your shingle out as a tax preparer and stick your net in the water, and there would be quite a few fish that would just kind of fall into your net without you even trying. But the problem is that will they come back the next year, because it's a very thin relationship that you have, no matter how much you try. And I speak from personal experience on this. No matter how much you talk about creating a relationship and everything, the reality is, in some industries, such as just standard tax preparation, your relationship with your customer is paper thin, no matter how good you take care of them. And anything could disrupt that. I've lost clients for just being slow responding to emails, and that's no joke, because there's nothing really, there's not a there in that relationship. Like you said, you don't become best buds with your tax preparer. They prepare your tax return and you hope you don't have to talk to them for another 12 months.
For that matter, if I have a good relationship with my tax preparer, either they're doing something wrong or I'm doing something wrong. And I don't want that.
That's right. So yes, there is the paradox of choice in that it creates these paper thin relationships that can always result in them just going someplace else at any time. But there's also a little bit different with tax work because you can always get clients. The question is, how long can you keep them?
Right. And I mean, from what I know, like a lot of the tax preparer type work is you're not gonna, like, most people don't go out and go, oh, let me get a better deal and go find somebody else. Like, well, you did fine last time. I'll use you again this year, right? Unless, again, maybe they're having a bad morning and you haven't responded to their email in a couple of days. Like, screw it, I'm gonna go find somebody else, right? So that kind of stuff happens. But I think where this really plays in is, again, when in the premium pricing space. Like, if you are trying to get into the advisory side of things and you're trying to charge premiums, and that's where the risk is higher, right? If I'm going to hire somebody to manage my money or help me manage my money and help me make business decisions and help me hopefully not ruin my marriage, to a certain extent, because money does, those types of things, there's a ton of risk there. So real or perceived doesn't matter. For them, the perceived risk is even more important because that's what I feel. There might not be actual risk there, but if I feel it, that's what matters. And that's where building credibility and trust up front as much as you can is insanely important. And you do that in a couple ways. One is, well, you do the work. But to do that, you have to win the business. Right? And it's sort of like, as big as your network is, you're going to get as much work as you can, and then you got to go outside of that kind of core network, which makes it harder. So how do you go and build relationships, if you will, trust and credibility with people who you don't personally know? Because that's how you're going to get net new business. And the best way to do that is you make people think differently about their problem. You don't solve the problem for them, but you make them think differently about it. Make them go, I never thought about it that way. Okay, well, how do you do that? I mean, you can do that by asking good questions. Like the best consultants ask the best questions. And what is a set of good questions if not a framework of thinking about a problem? At a very high level, that's kind of what it is. So really, that's when I say frameworks and methodologies, it's that. It's how can you help your ideal prospect frame or reframe a problem that is core to them that you can then solve? Because that removes the risk for them. There's never zero risk, right? And there are other ways to handle risk. It's contractual, pricing, et cetera, right? And you're gonna have to. Realistically, it's a combination of all those things. But before you get down to contracts, you have to build the affinity, right? People need to know, like, and trust you, and the only way to do that, not the only way, but a core way to do that, is through having proprietary frameworks and methodologies. The one caveat I will say there is, and this is where a lot of people go wrong, is they go develop something for the sake of developing something, and they just give it a different name and some fancy terminology, which doesn't mean anything, and actually confuses people more, which creates even more risk. It's like, you do what now? But if you're talking about it this way, I don't get it. The other 50 people I would consider talk about it this other way, I don't know. Like, the analogy I like to give is like, if somebody, say you're in a crowded conference room at an event, and somebody walks in but they're not walking in like a normal person. They walk in on their hands. They're upside down. You know, what the fuck? That's weird. Sorry, I don't know if you're okay with swearing on your show.
It's fine.
That doesn't, like, what is this person doing? I mean, you're going to get attention, but are you likely to get any business out of it? Probably not. Now, what if prior to that, you had done a whole bunch of studies that show that the extra blood flow to the brain decreases dementia and please, anybody, I'm not a doctor. I think this is totally fake. This is not advice. This is not medical advice.
Don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home. But like, you know, you have a body of knowledge and work that you've synthesized into something. And now you have a framework for how to effectively walk upside down to improve brain function. Now you walk into that room and that's been out there. People go, oh, that's the upside down walking dude for brain function. I got to talk to him. Like that's the difference.
How important is it to like specialize or choose a niche or whatever? Like say you're an accountant, and just off the top of my head, one that I thought of recently, or one that I saw recently, was we specialize in veterinary clinics, for example, or dentists' offices or whatever. I mean, whatever it is that your business does in the professional services realm, how important is choosing, like honing in on an industry or a niche or whatever? How important is that?
So niche down, yes. Industry, not necessarily. So is an industry a niche? Sure. Is a niche an industry? Not always. Doesn't have to be. So, I really, what it comes down to is thinking about what is my ideal client and prospect look like, and you can look at that in a variety of ways. And what are the common problem or problems that they have? That might be within a single industry. And sometimes the industry thing makes complete sense for a variety of reasons. It's also just easier to target, and things like that. So depending on how big you want your business to be, picking a very specific industry might make sense. And also, like, how big you want it to be, how interested are you in that work? Like, if I had to go and only work with dental offices, I'd rather throw myself off a roof, or whatever. Like, I get bored. So that for me, niching down into a specific industry doesn't make sense. You might be, well, Mike, what about professional services? I get to work with engineering firms. I get to work with change management firms. I get to work with accounting firms. I get to work with software development firms. Like, they have very similar, if not identical, problems that I solve for them, for the same reasons in most cases. But there's variety in there for me, right? And I niche down in other ways, right? So I only work with boutique firms, so size matters. I want them to be multidisciplinary, multiple partners, et cetera. That's my ideal. Doesn't mean I won't work with anybody outside of that, but so there are different ways to niche down. But really, when people think of niching down, what you really should be thinking about is niching down to a specific problem and related pain points rather than an industry necessarily. Now, you might find that, well, my best clients are veterinary clinics, and I enjoy working with them, and my people enjoy working with them, and they pay really well, and they have a unique set of problems that nobody else or most people don't solve, and I've got to, cool, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to caution people that it doesn't have to be an industry.
So you get your intellectual property in place, get your systems in place. It seems to me like that gives you something, beyond just being able to make money or make more money, that helps with the exit strategy too, right? Because you have something. Not everybody necessarily wants to sell their business. If it's a lifestyle type of business, it might just be you're going to work till you retire, and that's okay. But if you want to sell, you better have a system in place and not just have it be you and everything revolves around you. I think that ties into this, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah. especially if you think about the more commodity services businesses. And let's be real, like most services businesses are commoditized these days. So, if you think about how M&A happens, right? The best M&A is a strategic acquisition. So in that strategy, if your IP fits somebody's strategy, or it helps them elevate their business in a way, things like that, or your systems do whatever, you're going to get a higher multiple realistically than you will just otherwise, right? If it's a PE firm that's just trying to do a roll up of a whole bunch of it's a strategic acquisition, but in a different way, right? Versus if you're, Jason, you're running an accounting firm and you want to acquire an advisory firm. Would you acquire an advisory? Would you pay more for an advisory firm that just has a bunch of advisors with a good client base, or a firm that's got some advisors, a good client base, but also has a unique framework in how they advise the people that their client base really latches onto, that's popular in the market or whatever, that's known in the market?
Yeah, the unique framework. Yeah, the unique framework is always going to go for the higher price because it's not exactly a franchise sort of situation, but you're stepping into an existing system, which is a lot easier than you having to build a system yourself. Well, Mike Grinberg, fascinating conversation. I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I suppose, if we didn't scare you away, you could always come back again sometime.
I'd be happy to. This is fun.
Yeah, I've had a good time on this conversation. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. If people want to learn more about what you do, what's the best way that they should do that?
I am pretty active on LinkedIn, so Mike Grinberg, you can find me there, and the website is proofpoint.marketing.
All right, Mike Grinberg from Proofpoint Marketing, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch everybody again on another episode of Accounting in the Wild. And our thanks again to our guest, Mike Grinberg with Proofpoint Marketing. Accounting in the Wild is brought to you by MyCPE1. To earn CPE credits for this podcast, head over to my-cpe.com. We'll catch you again next time on Accounting in the Wild.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Accounting in the Wild with Jason Dynison.